Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for chapter 2 of Archangels of Phobos. This is an online LitRPG science fantasy web serial. I would obviously recommend starting with chapter 1 if you happen to have found this one first, so there is a link to it down in the description below. The other sensible starting point is Interlude 1, which I have not yet recorded at the time of making this video. And I'd just like to remind people that you will occasionally see some discrepancies between the images that are on screen for decoration and the storyline. When that happens, the storyline is canon. The images are simply there for decoration. Chapter 2 is The Stars Reach Back. Our cradle was a sanctuary, but there was an unspoken covenant. We never reached for the stars, and the stars never reached back. 25th of December, 2033. Folder Dominion with mana signature D27712. Physical location, an unnamed crater on Phobos. Pain ebbed enough for me to think. My shoulder blades felt cut open. Helmet shards glittered in a shallow puddle that somehow held my reflection. It was my face. Short brown hair, hazel eyes that had watched half a century and then some. The suit's chest was scuffed and torn. What stole the scene stood behind me in the water's skin. Wings. Iridescent feathers surged through a riot of colours, covering the entire spectrum from crimson tips through to violet near the holes the quills had punched through the fabric, with yellow, blue and everything else in between. I let myself smile. The palette fit the family I had now. It fit the person I'd always been, even in the days when I was still with Dean. I pushed to my feet. Whatever was happening, I'd face it standing. I tried to move the wings, and it took practice to make them work. After a quick mishap, I was flat on my back. I sprang to my feet as easily as I would have at 30 and flexed the wings again. I could learn to use them. I could, and I would. The cruel voice returned, imitating Dean once more. Quest alert. A contract quest is available. Besieged village. Powerful predators are attacking a farming village. Local defenders cannot repel them. You have 4 choices. Option 1. Path of the Dominator. Protect the villagers and enslave them under your banner, forcing them to provide tribute. Option 2. Path of the Defender. Protect the villagers and receive fewer rewards, but potentially gain allies to exploit later. Option 3. Path of the Devourer. Consume the village and this entire folded realm for a massive infusion of power. This will require repelling the attackers to obtain dominance first. Option 4. Path of the Dispassionate. Disregard the village entirely and return to the realm you name Phobos. Hearing 3 unconscionable options dispelled any lingering thoughts that the voice had anything to do with Dean. I was thankful for that. With 3 eliminated, I said the word defend, and agony consumed my left wrist. Contract quest accepted. This is a magically binding contract. Consequences for failure are severe. Using your crossbow or any other tools, protect the village from rampaging beasts. Slaughter them all. I took stock of my surroundings and felt the weight of the firearm. It felt like the Glock I always carried when hiking in bear country. A last resort I was at best average with, at least by Space Force standards. The military attracted some outstanding marksmen and markswomen, and I was not one of them. It wasn't a perfect replica, and had no visible way to reload it, but the weight confirmed it had at least a dozen shots. The entity that stole Dean's voice to mess with me, which I'd started to call a system, was a harsh critic, and even it regarded me as competent in its use. Perhaps shooting was one of the skills I'd been granted an improvement in for my Excision's End award. Nothing seemed amiss in the village proper, but a green-grey helix of energy appeared and stretched into the sky somewhere off to the side. I mentally designated the direction to the village proper to be north, and this helix was slightly under 100 metres northeast of my position. 4 creatures appeared at the helix's base, and the screaming started. Farmers sprinted towards the presumed safety of the village, although without proper walls, they would have no guarantee of safety at all. Just a temporary safety that comes from not being the first to be eaten. 2 of the creatures were familiar enough. Fairly large dinosaurs without feathers, each a bit larger than a rhinoceros. Possibly Allosaurus, although I wasn't certain. The other 2 were much more alien. One, the furthest away of the lot, was a mass of grey tentacles superimposed over its own personal thunderstorm, with no apparent torso. The tentacles converged in impossible geometries and shrank towards the centre, calling to mind artistic depictions of the 4th dimension. It was as though the tentacles converged at what we mathematicians call a point at infinity, a point outside our reality. The 4th and final creature was a cross between the 2, Another Allosaurus, but this time covered in writhing tentacles and with a single gigantic eye covering half of its face. Either this isn't real and I'm hallucinating and dying, or it is real and... No, must not doubt myself. I'm in real trouble and I've already decided to be decisive. I lined up a shot on the Eldritch Allosaurus. In a moment of sublime clarity, I account for wind speed, elevation, gravity, air pressure, supersonic drag, and a dozen other factors that I couldn't even name. I squeeze the trigger, and before I'm even aware of a recoil, I know that it's a perfect shot. Of course, that's what this miracle of calculation is. Capacity to make impossible calculations and leaps of intuition. The creature's eye explodes, and a second miracle is unleashed upon this world. A spiritual fatigue washes over me as a miracle of cataclysmic criticals conjures a cataclysm. The Eldritch Allosaurus head simply explodes in a shockwave and fireball that sears tentacle and body alike while scattering both to the winds. The explosion is so powerful that the two other dinosaurs also collapse and don't look like they'll rise again. Above the least mangled of the dying dinosaurs, an overlay appeared in my vision. Allosaurus, threat class, farcical, condition, mortally wounded. Perhaps the Lovecraftian dinosaur had died too quickly for this information to appear. The overlay faded as light left the dinosaur's eyes. The green-grey helix surged higher, and the massive tentacles undulated and roiled. Individual strands elongated and stretched towards fleeing farmers while the main body remained in place. The overlay snapped into place again. Unclassified dimensional horror. Threat class, derisory. Condition, hungry. I lined up a shot at center mass, adjusted for factors only my subconscious was aware of, and pulled the trigger. Only after committing to the shot did I understand my mistake. Light was bending around the horror. I hadn't aimed at the point at infinity. Instead, I'd aimed at that point's three-dimensional projection. Aiming differently wouldn't have allowed me to hit, but that didn't matter. I needed to calculate how the dimensional anomaly deflected shots. I fired 2 more bullets, and was distracted by the voice again. Combat XP gained, 4,600. New competent title awarded, 3 birds with 1 stone. It's like I'm in one of the VR games my oldest son keeps trying to get me to play with him. But the announcements weren't just the manipulative dopamine rush that formed the foundation of addictions. Something about one of those messages truly energized me. The spiritual exhaustion I'd experienced since the massive fireball faded, and I felt much more whole. I watched the bullets distort around everything that looked like it could be a vital point on the dimensional horror. A part of me knew that I shouldn't be able to follow the locations of the bullets, much less process them. But somehow, I had improved. Pythagoras, topology, and non-Euclidean geometry unite in a storm of calculation as I aimed the next shot. The shot spiraled around invisible anomalies before finally striking home. Bound folded realm ruptured. Combat XP gained 5,000. The results were sickening. There simply wasn't enough space to hold all the flesh and blood expelled from the wound. Gore erupted from the point of impact, spreading not just in 3 dimensions, but into 4. Meat, pus, and blood fountained onto the ground, both near the source and from extra-dimensional spaces in the air around the entity. While it had been a precise shot, the miracle of cataclysmic criticals did not appear to add any extra insult to the injury. I'd have to learn the rules of this new world fast. The shot definitely felt like a critical, but there must be a limitation I was unaware of. Tentacles that had been reaching out to grasp farmers redirected towards me, which was both a blessing and a curse. I hadn't quite been fast enough to save them all, but only one, an elderly woman, had been grasped. Save the ones you can, I said aloud, trying to convince myself. The overlay popped back into position. Unclassified dimensional horror. Threat class. Derisory. Condition. 1 of 4 subordinate realms pierced. I fired another test shot, studying the precise impact of dimensional warping as the shot inflicted a grazing hit on a tentacle. The next shot was a true threat. Just as one of the tentacles touched my ankle, I aimed directly at the apparent location of a different tentacle altogether. My shot travelled straight through the tentacle's projection, flying through it before striking the very heart of the storms. For a reason I still didn't understand, this was considered a cataclysmic critical, where the previous shot was not. The electrical energy building up inside the monster exploded and surged down every one of its tentacles. Each appendage convulsed and recoiled. It landed one final hit on my shin, and I fell hard. The tentacle was only just touching me, and its movement drew it away from me. The convulsions grew as the monster's own eldritch lightning tore it apart. Combat XP gained, 27,000. I sighed in relief as the helix winked out of existence and the monstrosity collapsed first into the familiar 3 dimensions, then collapsed further to 2 as it dropped to the ground. That monster's power was earmarked as Derisory, and it was terrifyingly powerful. But I have skills that are rated as astral and sublime. What might an astral or sublime entity be capable of? And why Derisory in place of developing? Contract complete. Path of the Defender upheld. Severe consequences avoided. Trauma suffered. The one you couldn't save. Resolve suppressed by 5 points for 7 days. You may bind, inspect, devour, or ignore the 2 undamaged realms that were bound to the unclassified dimensional horror. You will also receive a D rank reward chest with a slim chance to upgrade to C rank. Well, I am definitely not devouring a realm. That sounds horrifying. I mentally choose Inspect, and an image of the first realm filled my mind. It's much smaller than the world I'm in now, and it shows no sign of life. There's just a volcano punching through a glacier in an otherwise unremarkable Arctic landscape. Intuition gives me an idea, and I act on it without thinking about the choice as much as I should have. I select to bind the realm, and am presented with 3 options. I can bind it to the Miracle of Calculation, the Miracle of Flight, or the Miracle of Cataclysmic Criticals. Volcanoes and cataclysms? That sounds like a match. I don't give any explicit confirmation. My will is simply executed. I didn't ask for the other realm to provide a similar choice, but the malicious overseer wearing Dean's voice forced me to inspect the other realm as well. I gazed upon an infinite empty sky with birds and bugs and falling plants bent into a mind-warping topology. I watched the birds and saw that everything that fell too far appeared directly above its old position. But that was where normality ended. Moving too far north caused you to reappear all the way south, but flipped. So if you were near the northwest, you'd arrive near the southeast. As for west and east, it appeared you just hit a wall. It's a fascinating realm, and I'd have to research its topology on the 8-month journey home. Was it an eye bundle on a Klein bottle, or something else? I couldn't remember. University topology had been decades ago. And would I even make it home to research? Am I alive? Or is this an afterlife? No, Elishia, you've had this discussion with yourself already. I pronounced for my own benefit, although I'm sure the birds in the confusingly folded realm approved. Binding this open realm to the Miracle of Flight seemed the obvious choice, and so that was what I did. Character sheet: Elishia Ward. Class: Arcane Skirmisher, D rank. Miracles: Calculation, D rank. Flight, C rank. Cataclysmic Criticals, D rank. Surge to B. Mythic titles: Excision's End. Sublime titles: Voidwalker. Astral, Brilliant and Lesser titles: 3 birds with 1 stone. Combat XP: 46,600. Health: 49 out of 146. Resolve: 171 out of 146. Searched: Mana: 4 out of 146. Maladies: Prime for injury. Until health exceeds 50%, risk of enduring injury drastically increased. Spiritual fatigue. Until mana exceeds 50%, severity of mana overdraw increased. Traumas. The one you couldn't save. Resolve suppressed by 5 for 7 days. Joys. Small step, giant leap. Resolve surged by 30. Bind points: 4. Bind point 1. Cryovolcano. Signature F3122647. Bound to Miracle of Cataclysmic Criticals. Current mana reserve: 8,000 of 24,000. Bind point 2. Twisted Expanse. Signature F77123114. Bound to Miracle of Flight. Current mana reserve: 8,000 of 24,000. Bind point 3. Nil. Bind point 4. Brimfall Village. Signature D7712. Current mana reserve: 0 of 720,000. New title: 3 birds with 1 stone. Gain 10,000 combat XP for killing 3 opponents with 1 strike. Brimfall. This place had a name. I turned towards the villagers. Smoke curled off scorched thatch as the square held its breath. A woman with white hair stepped forward, a piece of stone serving as a makeshift cane in her right hand, and 3 men shadowing her at a wary distance. I'm Miriam. You fought them off, she said. We are in your debt. Her tone wasn't awe or gratitude. It was more resignation. I remembered the horrific options presented to me, the callous idea that as the one who saved the realm, I had the power to dominate or devour it. I chose to protect you, I said. I don't regret that choice. You're safe now. I let my gaze slip to the village edge. A pale shimmer hung there, braided light with a hint of green-grey, the same colour as the helix that had vomited monsters into their fields. At its heart, 12 glowing wires made up a hollow cube. A pathway back to Phobos, although with my shattered helmet visor, I wasn't certain that was a brilliant idea. One of the men followed my eyes. Flour dusted his sleeves, a miller or a baker. Please, do not step through that wire structure, he said. Our legends say it was once different, that 100 lifetimes ago, that it was a portal to a world that stretched on to eternity, a world that didn't end in 3,000 meters. But now, everyone who uses that portal is never seen again. I've been to the other side. It's a dangerous place with no air now. I came through, but you'd choke and suffocate quickly. I've bound folded realms now, however, and I should be able to get air from them. Miriam nodded. For people like us, not having air would kill us, yes. But tell me, our old songs, they speak of a world that does not end in 3,000 meters, a world with stone aplenty, and something called wood that makes putting up a building easy, a world called Earth, its capital Rome, and a great and terrible ruler, Imperator Caesar Augustus. Tell me, is this Earth real? It is. And if I can find a way back to it, I'll take you there with me. Although Rome and its empire haven't ruled much of the world for over 1,000 years, and that imperator is long dead. I filed away the name in case we had records on the Aspirant or in Fort Plank. Now, we have 2 great powers and 200 other nations. I'm from America, and the other great power is called China. Our countries raced to the wasteland beyond that gate, and mine won by just 10 days. How do I tell someone whose entire world is smaller than one suburb about a 250 million kilometre journey between planets? And how had knowledge, and maybe even people, from the Roman Empire wound up here in a reality fragment buried on Phobos? A thin woman with ink on her fingers came forward with a square bundle wrapped in cloth. I'm Sarai. We kept one more treasure, she said, for the day someone found us. A last resort to bargain if you served the Imperator, or a gift to repay one who chose to offer help. She set the bundle on a low stone bench and unwrapped the cloth. A coin lay inside, far too large to be practical in trade. Almost the size of a dinner plate, it was silver with gold embellishments underneath veined quartz. Lines of amethyst script spiraled across it, so fine that they seemed to move when the light shifted. The reverse side was engraved with a stylized cube and an unfamiliar face handily labelled in Latin as Imperator Caesar Augustus. Once more, my terrible knowledge of that ancient language didn't limit me. The mental overlay appeared again. Unique Dominion Token, Eternal Library, Rank D. Achievement available, occupies 1 bind point while attuned. Our legends say that this is a library bound into a room, the scribe said. It teaches nothing of today, only the information that was placed into it eons ago. We dared not bind it nor carry it past the doorway of light. Perhaps you can. I'll ensure its knowledge does not go unused. Thank you. The miller glanced at the shimmer again. I'm Yaakov. Please, stay with us, he pled. It might be safer for you. Thank you, but I will not. I need to understand what lies outside, and I must get back to my family on Earth. I fear something big has changed. The white-haired woman's eyes brightened. If you find the Earth of the Songs, she said, tell it we still remember it. If I can bring you back somehow, I will. I reasoned that access to this eternal library was the knowledge that I'd been promised for the Excision's End achievement. One promised reward reminded me of another, a D-rank reward chest, whatever that might be, and it could even upgrade. As I thought of the reward, a hiding point just outside reality revealed itself to me, and I withdrew the chest from it. The iron box was heavy, embellished with twisted shield motifs and an octahedron, and I took the lid off to reveal an armband and a bracer. My overlay marked it as Kinetic Deflection Shield C rank, and helpfully clarified what that was. It had 3 charges and recharged quite quickly, regaining 1 spent charge after 10 seconds without using any of them. When used, it absorbed the energy of a strike or spell aimed at me, and transformed it into forced movement. I turned to Yaakov. Hey, could you help me test a new item? I'd like you to throw a rock at me, as hard as you can. Don't worry, I don't think you can hurt me. If you're sure, he replied nervously. He lifted a rock the size of a brick and threw it with about the force of a half-court basketball shot. A throw that would have bruised the old me, but not really broken bones. I didn't need the miracle of calculation to see it was going to miss by a couple of meters, and I strode into the path of the rock and mentally activated the armband, thinking the whole time of the incoming rock. A translucent barrier shimmered into existence, and the rock's trajectory curved to strike it. It struck solidly and stopped in place. I expected a recoil that didn't come. Instead, I simply moved several meters. The ground between where I was and where I had been was untouched. Thanks. Let's try it again, in a new spot. I need to know how this works to survive in this world gone mad. I moved to a new location, where being shoved a couple of meters would push me over a bench, marked out a spot on the grass, and nodded to Yaakov again. Yaakov threw the rock harder and was on target. Again, no impact, no recoil. I just moved 4 meters, passing straight through the bench. And one final time. Gotta know what happens if it would push me into something before it happens to me in a fight. Yaakov nodded as I positioned. The third throw was terrible, but once I fixated upon the thrown rock, the bracer pulled it in so that it did strike me anyway. Excellent. I could protect others as well. I'd measured distances carefully, and instead of being pushed slightly past the middle of the bench, I was shunted to the last position before the bench that I could still stand in. That is a weakness. The defensive shield is potentially useless if I'm already up against a wall. We did one final test, and it confirms the theory. The impact is only blocked if I move. Questions remain about harder hits, but Yaakov is just an ordinary man and certainly can't hit me as hard as that tentacled terror did. Neither Miriam nor Sarai could help there. I'm sure there's more I could discuss with these people, but I had to learn to access the air of these realms back out on Phobos, and I needed to return to Natalia and Megan. I'd get a replacement spacesuit from the aspirant, write up everything that happened today in my encrypted diary, and then decide if I was still fit to lead the mission. As I stepped towards the wireframe cube, it expanded to surround me. The world of Brimfall village folded into a point, and the much more hostile world of Phobos unfolded in its place. And once more, I could still breathe. So this point marks the end of Chapter 2. After this, we're going to be looking at Chapter 3, which is going to be following what's been happening to Natalia and Megan since they were split up earlier in the story.